Why not attack the exhaust ports directly? Because George Lucas based the Death Star trench run on the Dam Busters raid conducted by the RAF against German hydroelectric dams in the Second World War. These dams were at the end of long river valleys lined with flat gun emplacements. The idea and visuals of it all appealed to old mate George, a super nerd, before it was cool, and so he put it into that one film of his which kinda rips off samurai movies, Flash Gordon, King Arthur, westerns, Lord of the Rings, Dune, and the Second World War. Star Wars, I think it is? That's the real-world explanation, at least. Leave now if you don't want a long-winded, nerdier version, because this is going to go on a while. You can look to see below. Yeah, the trench run in the original Star Wars. I was watching that movie with my dad yesterday. At the time of writing the script, this has been a little while since then. Well, if memory serves, I was playing on my phone and he was napping, but Star Wars was playing on the TV while that was happening, I swear. Anyway, a little bit off track, but it was necessary for time. So while I was on my phone, just doom scrolling, I got dragged into the movie during the trench run scene, the climax of the entire film, and something occurred to me which I know a lot of other people have wondered. Why didn't the Rebel X-Wings just come at the exhaust port of the Death Star directly? Why run that whole long trench, getting shot at constantly and attacked by Darth Vader while they did so? Well, after a bit of a think, I came up with 3 or 4 possible answers, and I just figured I would list them here for your enjoyment and critique after in the comments below. Also note that there's going to be an attempt at showing gameplay footage in the background of the latest LEGO Star Wars movie, their version of the trench run, just because that's probably my favorite game right now. And I would be remiss if I didn't include it just so there's something pretty for yins to look at. That was very southern. So the first idea that I had was that a more direct route would make them an easy target for the Empire. The Death Star was a major battle station brimming with weapons, aside from its super laser, after all. So presumably it would be festooned with blaster and turbolaser batteries of every size and description you could think of to ward off attack. If the starfighters of the Alliance had attacked on a more straight and to-the-point approach, they would have been within firing arcs of much more guns than they were in the trench run, making this route something of a suicidal approach. But by taking the trench as they did do, they would be in the line of sight of only those guns located in the trench itself, and thus stand a better chance of surviving to let fly their torpedoes. The second theory I have requires us to adopt the view of the Empire as shown in Andor, that being that the Galactic Empire is competent, capable, but ultimately rubbish. What do I mean by that? Well, it's unlikely that the designers of the Death Star would have left a thermal exhaust port totally undefended. And the fact that it was at the end of a narrow trench kinda shows that the Empire did try to defend it a bit. And as a part of that defense, I would assume that a local shield would have been placed over the exhaust port to make it harder to hit. The main issues with this theory that I can hear you typing in the comments already is that this goes against the established lore behind the Death Star, especially the events of Rogue One. This has Galen Erso build in a weakness to the exhaust port to make it go boom without the Empire noticing. To that I say, you're wrong and you owe me an apology, but also that it doesn't actually conflict with any established lore. The exhaust port would have been a fairly obvious weakness going from the surface to the main reactor as it did, and it makes sense that the Empire would have defended it to some extent. At the same time, the Empire defending the exhaust port, because it is a weakness, would have made Galen Erso's job a bit simpler. He could have added his weakness into the port itself, while also making sure that the shield didn't cover the trench. Makes what he did all the more impressive, and also explains where the rebels had to go. The third theory just largely makes sense, and also factors the real world into it somewhat, and that is that the trench run would have confused Imperial sensors, and made it harder to detect what the rebel fighters were doing. In essence, by getting as low and close to the surface as you can get, Imperial sensors would have had trouble detecting the fighters, much like happens today for precision strikes, as by getting low to the ground, jet fighters can manage to avoid detection and launch surprise attacks. Not being detected would have had several advantages for the rebel fighters. First off, it would have made it harder to shoot them down, and also made it more difficult for the Death Star's own fighters, outnumbering them by several orders of magnitude, to find them and shoot them down. The other advantage to getting low is that even if TIE fighters did catch them, it would likely confuse their targeting and tracking systems to make shooting them down a bit harder. So, your chances of survival go up, and everybody likes that. Go down the trench to hit the port. And finally, we get into what is probably my favorite theory, that being that all of them likely went into the rebels' decision to fly along the trench. By doing so, they would have been less obvious for Imperial reactions, would have let them get past the shield over the trench, and also made it harder to hit them and confused Imperial tracking information. Personally, this is the one I find most likely. There was not a single reason behind the rebel fighters making the trench run as they did, but that it made sense for many reasons. Very often in the real world, there's no simple explanation to anything. There's layers, like an onion. If you get that reference. But that the Death Star had layers, actually, like an onion. Anyway, there's usually more than one explanation behind why something is or why something was done, and I kind of like the idea that there's multiple reasons why the rebels did this. I mean, I could have just said that at the opening, but where would the fun of that have been? Well, that's it for another video. Hopefully you liked the gameplay going on in the background, made things a little more interesting, hopefully. If I did things right, there shouldn't even be any sound, so I won't get sued by Disney for using their music. That would be very nice. You gotta keep the mouse happy. But hopefully you liked this video. Hopefully some of my theories made sense. If you have your own theories, let me know in the comments below. Also, as always, comment. I already told you, to comment. Subscribe. I didn't tell you to subscribe. You should definitely do that. If you want to support the channel or have input in future videos, follow me on Patreon. $1 or $2 US a month. Gets you access to videos a day early. Patreons, if you're watching this on Patreon, a day early. Usually plus or minus a couple of hours from a full 24 hours, 12 hours, whatever it is. But usually you get it a bit in advance, which is nice, I'm told. A little bit of a perk, but feel free to do that if you want. Also, I take requests for ships. Feel free to do that. Drop it in a comment. I'll add it to a list. I've got a list knocking around here somewhere that's quite long, but Patreons also get to vote on that sort of thing, so it's good. Anyway, bye.